Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third debate of our spring season and I don't even know how many debates of our podcast year, our pandemic year of the University of Arizona debate series. I'm Ted McLoof, your host and moderator for the evening. We have a really excellent debate to get through tonight. We are going to be talking about technology. We talked about big tech as far as the companies go a few weeks ago. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the technology itself. And whether or not it can be private. Tonight's debate resolution is exactly that. Smart tech can't be private. A few things that I want to make sure that we get checked off before we start our debate this evening. First of all, as always, we want to announce our winners from last 2 weeks ago's debate. Our debate 2 weeks ago was America's Political Debates Miss the Mark. And the affirmative team, who was arguing in favor of the idea that America's political debates missed the mark, won that debate. So congratulations to them. We really appreciate the really wonderful arguments that we had. And thanks as always to our guest speakers that we had that evening, Matthew Abraham and Dr. Buchanan. I want to make sure that everyone knows exactly how it is that we will be voting this evening. We will be using Google Forms as a platform to vote. You can find the vote in either the comments section or in our bio on Instagram. If you're viewing this on YouTube, which is always the way to look at it after we have already broadcast live, and the link will be in the YouTube description. This is the voting system that we're going to determine the winner with. This is, as always, an Oxford debate. And as is usually the case, the winner is not declared by who wins the most votes, but who ends up changing the vote the most from the beginning to the end. That means that you need to vote twice. So please make sure that you log your vote in both before the debate while you are watching and listening to our wonderful debaters make their arguments. And afterwards, after you hear what they have to say, we want to make sure that we have an even-handed debate. So please make sure that you vote both before and after. And if you didn't vote before, don't vote after, because we don't want to skew any kind of voting system for any reason. But that's the way that we're going to determine the winner of this evening's debate. I also want to make sure that we announce that we are going to have our next debate that's coming up in March, which I'll share my screen right now for our excellent graphics. That is not our graphics. Hold on. Our next debate is going to be the topic of heated police rhetoric. Heated rhetoric won't solve policing. Please join us on March 18th, the day after St. Patrick's Day, the perfect way to deal with your hangover at 7 p.m. We still have a month before that debate is going to happen. But of course, heated rhetoric won't solve policing is going to be certainly a heated topic. So it'll be enjoyable and, as always, informative with our excellent debaters. That said, I want to dive straight into our debate this evening, which again, the question tonight is smart tech can't be private. If you are in favor of this particular resolution, please make sure that you vote in the affirmative before we begin. If you do not agree with this resolution, in other words, you think that there are ways that it can be private, or however way you're interpreting that particular resolution, please make sure that you vote in the negative. And if you're unsure, which is a totally acceptable, reasonable place to be, then feel free to vote for I don't know or undecided. That said, let's dive into our debate right now. And arguing in favor of the affirmative of the idea that smart tech indeed cannot be private, we have Molly Krantz.
Alrighty, hello everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for tuning in to our debate this evening. We affirm the resolution that smart tech can't be private. Smart tech has been defined by the industry as technology that is self-monitoring, analysis, and reporting technology. This includes smartphones, smartwatches, surveillance systems, and other data collecting devices. The problem with this is that while these devices grant us more convenience to our lives, it also invites the ability for these surveillance systems to be breached. This is a fact that was all too real for the LeMay family. Ashley LeMay installed a Ring camera device in their daughter's room to ensure optimal safety while working her overnight nursing shifts at the hospital. And what occurred was anything but optimal safety. What first started off with random music being played in the daughter's bedroom quickly progressed into a mysterious voice taunting the 8-year-old daughter and a strange man encouraging destructive behavior before her father could come in and ending the terror. Unfortunately, this story is not uncommon, and smart tech disturbs our privacy in three main ways. First, when we are allowing these smart tech devices into our home, we open up the opportunity for more hackable software into our lives. Maurice Turner, the Deputy Director of the Center for Democracy and Technology, explains, quote, "It is incumbent upon customers to recognize just how many different kinds of sensors they are bringing into their homes, whether it's microphones, video cameras, or just devices that are capturing all sorts of data about them and their guests," end quote. These kinds of sensors are all around us, in your smartphone, in your tablet, in your laptop, and even more. These sensors are what collect our data, therefore making our data more vulnerable to hacking. Second, most smart devices do not have security or privacy controls built in to protect sensitive data. According to Rebecca Harold, a woman in IT for over 25 years and CEO and founder of Privacy and Security Brainiacs, states that those relatively few devices that do have privacy controls rarely have them set to be secured by default. And as an effect, those using them can be mistakenly believing that they were advertised as having security built into the software. The dangers of hackers are ever more present, with the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency placing out a warning in December for millions of devices because an estimated 150 manufacturers ranging anywhere from networked thermometers, smart plugs, printers, office routers, and healthcare appliances, all the way up to components of industrial control systems, were identified to have vulnerabilities. Third, smart technology creates a sense of false privacy. The Brookings Institution explains the aggregation and correlation of data from various sources make it increasingly possible to link supposedly anonymous information to specific individuals to infer characteristics and information about them. The result is today a widening range of data that has the potential to be personal information, i.e., to identify us uniquely. In a study conducted by the Pew Institute, 91% of Americans agree or strongly agree that people have lost control over how personal information is collected and used by all kinds of entities. The neg will try to convince you tonight that your privacy can be secure, but in reality, it's far from the truth. I encourage you to think, what if it was your daughter being spied on? Or what if it was you being spied on in the bathroom, the shower, or changing? When you have an experience with data breach, it changes the way you view these big tech privacy companies. It is for these reasons that we urge you to vote for the affirmative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Molly. And sorry, I forgot to lay this out. We'll be hearing our opening statements. That'll be 3 to 4 minutes long, followed by a second round where our debaters will have a chance to address each other and answer questions. And then we'll have our closing statements, which will be 2 to 3 minutes each, after which you'll all be allowed to vote a second time. So thank you very much, Molly. And moving on to the opening statement from the negative side of the resolution, Smart Tech Can't Be Private, we have Josh Tasha.
Thank you, Ted. All right, just give me one sec. Okay, everybody ready? All right. Pavas and I are extremely proud to negate the resolution that smart tech can't be private. When it comes to smart technology, consumers are given an impossible choice: convenience or privacy. However, we reject the affirmative stance that this choice is inevitable. Instead, we understand that this is a product of the specific conditions at play right now in the smart tech market. To prove this, we'll provide 2 main contentions. First, we'll show why companies aren't limiting their abuses of privacy right now, and next, we'll offer some solutions that more governments can and should implement to limit these abuses. The ultimate conclusion from the evidence we'll present is that smart tech, if treated correctly by societies and governments, can absolutely be private. In other words, we do not have to choose between convenience or privacy. We can have both. In terms of definitions, we agree with our opponent's definitions about smart tech. However, we do want to stress the definition of can't in this debate. Can't means something that does not exist within the realm of possibility, which means if we prove that an increase in privacy for smart tech is within the realm of possibility, then we've won this debate. In terms of private itself, we're going with the definition of restricted access, which basically means a person can stop others from viewing their information if they so choose. So I'll just jump right in with our first contention, which is that tech businesses understand their products aren't private right now, but won't change that without an external actor. We agree with Molly and Vincent that smart tech is not private enough in the status quo. However, this failure is not because it is impossible to make this tech private, but rather companies have no reason to do it. Cybersecurity expert Kirsty Fisher reports that the increased trend of hacking of smart technology has left a clear impression on the industry. However, while business leaders are more aware of potential privacy risks, many are unwilling to take steps to ensure collective privacy for fear on losing out on innovation. Basically, they know that if they individually take steps to ensure privacy, they could be missing out on a small amount of profit, making them less competitive than others in the market. This represents a perverse incentive, misaligning the needs of companies from the needs of consumers. As Bruce Schneier, CTO of IBM Resilient, qualifies, there's a fundamental market failure at work. Lack of security is a form of invisible pollution, and like pollution, the only solution is to regulate. This brings me to my second point, which is that governments can and should regulate smart technology to ensure privacy. Thus far, there have been numerous recommendations made by the federal government that detail how devices can be improved to make them more private. Unfortunately, most are non-binding and need to be actually enforced in order to be used within the industry. This gets back to the previous point. Many companies understand that the devices they sell are simply not private enough, but they won't change that unless somebody forces them to. Thus, we say that in order for smart tech to be private, there must be broad, enforceable government regulations on the collection, storage, and sharing of data. There are two examples of these laws that have been passed recently, which provide a clear path forward. First is the EU's General Data Protection Regulation, which basically means that consent for personal data use has to be freely given, specific, informed, and unambiguous. Furthermore, requests for consent have to be presented in clear and plain language, which avoids a common issue of companies flooding their privacy policies with incomprehensible text to encourage us to agree without reading it. Another step forward is the California Consumer Privacy Act, which passed in 2018, but is only now starting to be enforced. We think this model specifically would work well in the United States. It basically enshrines rights that consumers have over their personal data, including the right to know what personal information is being collected, the right to know whether that data is sold or disclosed and to who, the right to say no to that sale or disclosure, the right to access that personal information, and the right to equal service and price, even if they exercise their privacy rights. Again, this is not the end-all be-all of data privacy regulation. However, we do think it is a good model for how governments can adopt increased privacy regulations in the future. Smart tech's lack of privacy is not due to some immutable characteristic of the technology. Rather, it is due to a failure in the market to provide for consumers' needs. That market failure can be solved by broad government regulations, meaning consumers do not have to make the trade-off of privacy versus convenience. Insofar as we show that these regulations are in the realm of possibility, then we've proven the resolution false and therefore win this debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josh. Okay, great. Wonderful opening statements. Really a lot to chew on here. So I want to just move into our second round. And because the negative just got a chance to speak, I'm going to throw my first question over to the affirmative. One of the main points that obviously the negative is bringing up here is the issue of consent. And I heard a little bit of that in Molly's opening statement as well, this sort of concept of we wouldn't want someone to be spying on us without us knowing. Obviously, that's what spying means. So let me just throw that over to the affirmative. What if we had the kind of legislation that the negative is talking about here, where consent is required for data collecting? I mean, is that a sort of concession in some way, a sort of a way to safeguard privacy as long as people know that this stuff is going on?
So I think there's an important thing to understand with data collection is that a lot of times we already consent with this data collection. The main issue, though, with data collection is something that the negative didn't even address at all, which is super important, and that is background data collection. Actually, a study from both Princeton and UChicago found in 2019 that smart devices such as Amazon Fire TV and also Roku actually collected background data on individuals that was encroaching on their terms of service. Specifically, the study found that they discovered widespread practice of collecting and transmitting unique identifiers such as Wi-Fi MAC addresses and SSIDs, stuff that is normally secure within your own home that you wouldn't think that would be encroached upon, but because you allow this kind of these these kinds of devices in and that background data, that encroaches on your privacy. And I'm glad that Josh actually brought up the EU General Data Plan, because the New York Times wrote about it, in which how it is essentially an utter failure. They wrote this back in April because of the fact that these rules have been a victim of a lack of enforcement, poor funding, limited staff resources, stalling tactics by these tech companies, and overall, it's just really hard for them to enforce these privacy safeguards that they even tried to establish in the first place, because there's no way to fully look at if your data is being viewed or not by that tech company without your permission.
So the privacy safeguards, in your estimation, theoretically work great, but in practice, you're suggesting that it's more difficult than just sort of writing the right legislation, is what you're suggesting.
Correct.
Okay, affirmative. What do we say about that? I mean, is there a practical way around what the kind of obstruction that Vincent's bringing up?
Yeah, thank you, Ted, and thank you, Vincent, for your answer. So what we, the NEG, are trying to say, we fully accept that there are privacy breaches, and that's what we talked about, right? Companies don't have incentives to not collect this data, to not store it. And what we're talking about is informed consent, not just consent, but informed consent, which is what the laws that Josh laid out talk about. They aim to give the consumer information about how their data is being looked into, and therefore inform their consent so that they can take steps in the right direction. Now, what we want to emphasize, Ted, and everyone watching tonight, is that the AF is talking about an ideal world where, assuming that people know their data is being collected and sold, that they will stop using smart tech. What we, the NEG, are trying to say that, yes, there are problems there, but the only way to get around it is to look at practical solutions, and there's a long way to go, but the best way is to get started.
Is it all right if I just jump in here, Ted? Okay, and I just want to talk super quickly, Vincent, what you brought up about the EU's lack of enforcement. We agree that these laws that are in existence right now could definitely be enforced and handled better. That's why we prioritize the California example specifically, because that's being, the enforcement started this year, but they've already filed numerous lawsuits against companies that are collecting data, which includes background data. I mean, it's all personal information. So any data, no matter whether it's background data or something that you explicitly agree to being collected, is still yours under this law and can be protected as such. But we really want to stress that, like, there already are a lot of laws that are in existence right now, but they're not being used being enforced in the industry because there's really little enforcement mechanisms, like the EU example. But the path forward is more direct enforcement, like we see with California. It's more governments saying to these companies, hey, no, you can't just, use this data however you want. We're going to sue you because that's illegal. And we think those steps in the right direction show us that smart tech can be private. And remember, we're talking about the realm of possibility here. We're not saying that smart tech is private, and we're not saying that smart tech will be private. We're saying that if these governments start adapting these enforcement mechanisms, then smart tech can ultimately be private.
Can I jump in, Ted?
Oh, yeah. Go, Molly. Go.
I was going to say that there's a lot of talk about informed consent, and I'm glad that Josh, I don't remember who from the negative brought it up, but I'm glad it was brought up, because informed consent doesn't really exist if users themselves are uninformed about what data they are giving up. According to Pew Institute, 78% of the US adults say that they understand very little or nothing about, data collection in general. And I know that I certainly didn't understand a significant amount about data collection prior to this debate. And so I think that's something else that we need to keep in mind when thinking of, creating all of these laws, which is what the NEG is highlighting, is that, if we did X, Y, and Z, and if we, kind of lived outside of this realm of our reality, then we would be able to have these possibilities when, in fact, users themselves aren't really unsure of what data is vulnerable.
And Ted, adding on to Molly's point, Josh talks a lot about the realm of possibilities. Well, let me give you just a straight up, very clear realm of possibilities. The fact that your data is constantly being collected, the fact that your data is being viewed by whatever marketing company for for whatever purposes that they have. The fact of the matter is, Josh brings up that there are you have the ability to control your own data. Well, that's the nice thing, isn't it? You can control your own data, but you still have to give it to the social media companies. One thing that Josh didn't address is that there's no solution or alternative if you say no, that you don't want to give your data. What happens if you do not agree to the Facebook terms of service? Josh, can you create a new Facebook account? Are you able to create one?
I just want, if you let me jump in here. Well, that's the thing. If we change the Facebook terms of service, so getting back to Molly's point, that's a really great part of these regulations, is a lot of them include specific pieces that deal with clear, plain language. So it's basically mandating that a lot of these privacy policies, which, right now nobody reads a privacy policy, I certainly don't, because it's written in incomprehensible language. A lot of these laws right now, what they're proposing is that we make sure that those privacy policies are actually comprehensible, that an everyday consumer can read it. And second of all, what we want to stress here is that the option should not be you either have a Facebook account or you don't, right? It shouldn't either be you have privacy or you don't. You should have the ability to toggle and select which specific data you want to give to Facebook or any other company and which you shouldn't. That's why California is passing these laws, ensuring that we have the right to choose what data we want to give to these companies. And if Facebook wants to take all that data from us, well, too bad. It's our data. We should be able to choose. And what these laws are putting forward is merely a step in the direction towards that goal.
So I want to throw my second question here. It was a phenomenal volley back and forth, guys. Let me throw my second question here over to the negative, since my first question was for the affirmative. And it's kind of off of the point that Vincent had just made, and I want to sort of pursue this a little bit further, which is just this concept of the monopoly that a lot of these places have on our data, right, or have on smart technology in general. But they're also private companies. So I'd like to hear, just for clarification, the legislation that Pavis and Josh, that you are proposing. How do we demand that private companies meet certain sort of stipulations from the government? I mean, I understand that you're suggesting that we have clearer language in the privacy policies that they put out, but can we make them have a specific kind of privacy policy? I mean, we can have consumers certainly consent to certain kinds of privacy policies, but what if a consumer says, sorry, I don't like the privacy policy that Facebook has on there? I think the question the AF is asking here is, do you just not have Facebook? Do you just not have Amazon? What is is it possible for that legislation to sort of enforce a certain set of policies, privacy policies, onto these private companies?
Again, what I just talked about previously is what these laws want to stress is not the dichotomy, right? It's not either you don't have a Facebook account or you do. When you have the rights over your own data, you get to decide what specific data is being disclosed to Facebook. So again, no privacy policy really exists like this right now, because companies, it's just not in their best interest. It wouldn't satisfy their profit margins to give people more rights over their privacy. But if government enforced it and said, hey, you have to give people choices, governments can outline this specific data choices that consumers can have. And then in a privacy policy, for instance, consumers can actually select, I want Facebook to be able to collect this, not this, for instance. I want them to be able to collect things like whose posts I'm liking, what I'm searching up, but I don't want them to collect things about my location or my credit card information, for instance, or, my social security number. And again, that's what this really is about. In terms of privacy should be understood in terms of restricted access, which means you can restrict access to your own data as you see fit, just like you can restrict access to your own physical object as you see fit.
Could I just add to what Josh said? When Josh outlined the California Privacy Protection Act in particular, he talked about how fines are imposed and the act exists within a legal framework that supports the policies outlined in the act. For example, the California Consumer Privacy Act will be enforced by the California Privacy Protection Agency, and fines have been increased, especially with regards to minors, which was what Molly was talking about initially. What we're trying to say, and I think a natural question that pops up within the ambit of this debate is, we and the AF are agreeing, right? We're agreeing on the fact that privacy breaches exist in reality, in the world we live in. But what the AF fails to address is that, do we just give up smart tech? The very fact that all of you are here tonight and we're broadcasting on Facebook means that you are consenting to use this. And the debaters here are more informed than the general person Molly speaks of or Vincent speaks of, right? We know that we're agreeing to sell our data away. So a natural question that comes up is, how are you going to ask your friends or family to watch your debates in the world we live in that's plagued by COVID unless you use smart tech?
So Ted, I think one major thing the negative is trying to really construe here is this premise that we, the affirmative, is against smart tech. No, we are for smart tech. What's important to understand, though, is that the possibility on if privacy can exist. This is what the debate's about. The last debate about getting rid of smart technology and data collection was the one 2 weeks ago. Debated in that, it was great. But what's important to understand is that with privacy is that it's going to be breached no matter what. Your data is being collected by whatever tech company, or you're posting it. You are putting yourself on the digital map. And that is very important to understand because actually we've seen that as we've become more included with our smart technology is that we've seen more data breaches. In fact, Forbes reported that in the first 6 months of 2019, more than 4.1 billion records that were online, that was your privacy, they were breached. Now, it wasn't the data, or it wasn't a company that went and released your data, but it was individuals. It was the encroachment of other individuals. And as Josh brought up in his speech, companies simply don't care about security, about enforcing and beefing up their privacy policies in order to ensure that occurs. That in of itself shows that you cannot have privacy. If companies are not willing to protect your privacy, as the negative says, there cannot be privacy in smart tech to begin with. Use their own words against them.
Well, just to respond to that super quickly, once again, we are talking about the realm of possibility here. And yes, we agree that right now in the status quo, privacy is pretty abysmal, both in terms of your data itself and the technology. But once again, we actually say that there is some sort of solvency here because governments can force companies to have secure privacy. For instance, right now there's a bunch of Department of Homeland Security recommendations on how companies can make smart tech more private, including like in the design phase, running simulations and running tests, attempting to breach it like a hacker would. But the key is that these are recommendations. They're not laws that companies have to follow. And if they're just recommendations, if they're not mandatory to follow, then no company is going to follow them because that's, wasting money. We got to, sell as many of these poorly made smart pieces of smart technology that are very susceptible as possible. And so that's why the government should step in. It steps in any other case of malpractice in terms of business. It steps in if a product harms you, if a product physically harms you, then the government steps in and say, no, you have to make this product better. And that's exactly what we're saying can and should happen with smart tech, right? The frameworks already exist, and we can talk about the frameworks in terms of making the products better. All that needs to happen right now is increased enforcement.
Just if I could say something, Ted, just
go ahead, and I'm going to throw my next question over to the affirmative.
Okay, yeah. I just want to say that if all of us start subscribing to the cynical perspective that the app is taking, we're just going to stop using smart tech. We're going to stop using social media. We're going to stop using smart home devices. We're going to give up on the idea of cool, driverless cars. And then we're just going to live under a rock, which is really hard considering the world we currently live in. The app time and again has circumvented the actual question that we're posing. Okay, we agree that there's a problem, but do you have possible solutions to this other than saying, hey, we have this problem and we're just going to live with it or not live with it?
Last point, Ted, before you come in, I'm so sorry to cut you off. I just want to say that as my partner Vincent has said now twice in this debate, we are not saying that you should not own any technology. We are not saying that you should not live under a rock, as the neg just stated. The affirmative doesn't, we're not stating that. We are just simply pointing out the holes in the current system right now.
And also, the negative keeps on trying to place a burden of solvency. There's no solvency that is supposed to be needed on the basis of the affirmative. All we simply have to prove in this debate to you as a viewer is that there is the realm of possibilities that your tech can be breached. If we can show that from happening, then we win the debate.
So this is actually my follow-up question that for the affirmative. And I have a similar question for the negative, which is I want to kind of maybe get a clearer idea of what both sides are talking about when they mean private. I think we've gotten a pretty clear idea of what we mean by smart tech, and even can't has been pretty clearly defined. But I want to talk about just what it is that both sides mean by private. So affirmative, I'm hearing the word breach a lot, and I want to sort of explore what exactly you mean by that and how serious a threat that is, because I'm imagining that maybe the analogy would be to say, if we were to argue that I'm never fully secure in my house because there is always a possibility that some random robber might sort of break in. But I would say that in general, I feel pretty secure in my house. I have, locks on the door. I have a coyote who lives with me, and I have, an alarm, right? And so we have all those things. So in other words, I guess I'm asking, when we talk about breaches, are we talking about sort of the exceptions here, that these are sort of really kind of extremities that are over on the side, or is that kind of the norm? Is that a pretty sort of, is that a commonality enough that we would say privacy doesn't exist when breaches exist?
I would say it's starting to become more of a norm, that we're starting to see these breaches occur much more often, whether it's against a private company or even a government. But on the flip side of it, there's a second key component to privacy that I was going to bring up in my speech, but I guess today or right now is a good time. And that's on that there has to be trust between both the consumer and also the data collector. As the Brookings Institution actually explained that if we're talking about a fundamental need for baseline privacy legislation, it needs to ensure that individuals can trust their data, specifically those companies that are in control. But we don't see that at all happening in the status quo because, as Pew found, that roughly 7 in 10 or more say that they are not too or not at all confident that they actually even admit to these mistakes in the first place. Josh talks a lot about accountability, but if you can't even admit to your mistakes and your consumers see that and they don't even trust you, how can there be an assurance of privacy? The negative never did anything to address that consumer privacy or confidence would actually increase under this. In fact, most people are confused on the type of background data that is even collected to begin with, and very few even understand the concept of data. If you can't understand the concept of data, how can you place trust in someone that your data is in their hands?
Well, just to respond to that, personally, I know I would be more trustworthy of a company like Facebook, for instance, if I knew that the government was holding them accountable. If I knew that they were using my data inappropriately, or they used specific data without my consent, and the government was able to sue them, pointing to a specific law and saying, hey, you violated this law, we're going to fine you a specific amount and make sure you change your policies, then I would probably be more trustworthy of that company. But again, we can speculate about trustworthiness some other time. What's at stake here, I think, to Ted's question, is the definition of privacy. So we told you a definition of privacy that's commonly understood within the cybersecurity industry is in terms of restricted access, which means that a person can, or it's also called limited control, but it's basically that a person controls, the person whose data is being generated controls how much data is being, sent out to other people, when, why. They basically have complete control of their data, right? And that's exactly what the types of laws that we're proposing be expanded do. They enshrine, not on the company side, they less so say companies can't do this, this, and this. They say consumers have the control over their data, and they decide what a company can do with that specific data. So if, like I said before, they can, if a privacy policy is made under these laws, it's basically, hey, we want to take this, this, and this. Which will you let us take? Right? Again, it gives the onus onto the consumer, and it gives them the ability to decide which data they want to give out. And again, the reason that we agree with the AF that this isn't happening in the status quo. Because again, no company is going to decide, oh, I'm going to give my consumers more control of our technology. No, they want to make as much money as possible for as cheaply as possible. Like Molly said, most smart tech doesn't have default privacy controls set into them. And there's a reason for that. It's because nobody's forcing them to. But if the government forced them to, if it set up standards that said, hey, no, we're not going to accept this faulty product, you have to make it private, then the companies will comply. And that would probably make people more trustworthy in their tech.
I'm glad you mentioned the word trustworthy in tech in general, Joshua, because again, to keep on quoting Pew, is that 75% of people felt like the government won't hold data companies accountable. And this could be due because they make so much money. This is a huge flaw that we see. And so when you keep on saying, we could or we can, government can do X, Y, and Z, the people who are using these devices don't feel like the government will hold data companies accountable anyways.
And you want some accountability, a real world example that Josh gave, the EU data plan, in which we've seen that it doesn't even work in holding accountable because, as Political explained back in September, that Google and several of those data companies, they're still violating the rules. It doesn't matter if you have this realm of possibilities of enforcement. Violations still exist no matter what. There is no world that you can live in which this violation, or in which your privacy cannot be violated. There is always a possibility that it will be breached, whether that's by a data company or by an external actor. And so that's important to understand. They can go and talk about policy, but the fact of the matter is your privacy is never safe online. What you put out there has a chance that it can be breached, that it can be viewed by someone. There's no guarantee that you're going to be safe regardless of what legislation ever gets passed in a futuristic world.
One last question that I'm going to throw over the negative, and then we're going to turn to our questions from our audience, which I'm told we have a whole lot. So I'm going to turn my last question over to the negative, and again, it's sort of in the same realm of talking about sort of the clarity of how we're talking about private and how we're talking about smart. Before the negative, you guys had said that if we can choose which data we give to Facebook with this legislation, right? We decide that, we're okay with Facebook, for instance, knowing what we're liking, what kind of posts we're liking, but maybe not necessarily our location or something like that. So I'll just throw this question. Isn't that in some ways giving up part of our privacy, right? I mean, if we are sort of telling them, yes, you can see what posts we're liking, we are still, I mean, it's just, we're consenting to not be private, but we're still losing a bit of privacy, right? I mean, if we tell them that they can't collect any of our data and that's the decision that we make, then how smart is that technology? I mean, is it even sort of learning anything about us to be able to be smart if we're not giving any data whatsoever?
Well, Ted, what Josh and I talked about initially is that this trade-off exists, and we know it exists, the trade-offs between convenience and privacy, right? And that's what this whole debate is about. Now, when you talk about someone consenting to giving their data, they're still consenting to it. So at least I know that certain parts of my data are available to smart tech companies, right? And I am getting perceived benefit out of it, and not just perceived benefit, but actual benefit, right? The fact that I choose to give up my location on, say, Snapchat sometimes allows my friends to keep track of me if I'm out at a party and make sure I get home safe. So I am still getting benefit out of it. But what we're talking about is being informed and having certain aspects of our data available, which we are in control of, which is what Josh talks about, limited control or restricted access.
And just to jump in here, again, I don't think that this dichotomy of private or not private is really helpful. Because, in reality, in the way that the world works, like even in regards to physical property, it's not a hardline choice between private and not private. Indeed, there's a whole realm of law, like concerning the Fourth Amendment, that deals with issues when we don't really know what's private and not private. And that's what we want to stress here. When we have these types of laws, we're increasing the degree of privacy available to people. Will there ever be 100% complete privacy? Probably not unless you turn off your computer. No. But at the end of the day, we don't have to resign ourselves and say, oh, well, there's nothing we can do. You know, it's always going to be not private. That's simply not the case. We can make changes to ensure greater privacy exists. The idea that smart tech can't be private at all in any way is simply false. And remember, that's what we have to disprove or prove in this debate, is smart tech can't be private. And we've shown you that there are possibilities that exist if they're enforced correctly. We agree, enforcement is an issue, but if governments do get this right, then smart tech doesn't have to be not private. It can be private. Again, can is the operative word here.
If I may just circle back to something Ted said earlier, we also have privacy breaches in the offline world, and you can't completely have 100% privacy when you're living among other human beings.
So I think also what Josh and Pavlos tried to illustrate is that you have control over your data, this privacy, but they're essentially giving this false premise of privacy, right? Because when we use these smart technologies, yes, we consent, but really, do consumers exactly know what they're giving up? They don't. That's a clear answer. But on top of that, what's important to understand that even with these enforcement mechanisms, as Green Valley State University explained, that when you give control to the user, it's just an illusion in a way. Even with all privacy settings turned on, there's no guarantee that these companies still aren't going to misuse or abuse this data no matter what. Even when we've looked at companies in the past that have said you have complete privacy, let's take Apple as an example. Apple had released a statement in which they had said that they were giving users more privacy over their iPhones, that data collection when the apps are not being used or anything like that would not occur. Although a Washington Post report found in 2019 that in iPhones, background data collection is actually really prevalent without people even knowing, in which they found 5,400 hidden app trackers guzzling all of the data on the phone without people even knowing. So how can the negative in this world essentially enforce some kind of policy in which people don't even know if their policy is being breached in the first place?
Perfect transition into our first audience question, which is for the AF actually. And one of our savvy viewers is really honing in on this word can't here, which is they're asking, can't is present tense. And one of the questions that we have here for the AF is, smart technology is so new. Maybe it can't be private, but will it ever be private? I think the question here is it ever possible in any realm of possibility in the future? Does the AF think that it can in some way at one point be private? Or is that just something that's completely off the table?
No, because as Molly and I have discussed, that smart technology, it's all based on the premise of data collection, data reporting, analyzing whatever it may be. If it's your Apple Watch, it's analyzing your heartbeat now. Smart technology relies on this data collection. As long as we live in a world in which your data is being uploaded to some kind of cloud, to some kind of storage device, there simply cannot be privacy, period. You are voluntarily giving up your data to someone else to view. You don't even know who that other person is. It could be Jeff sitting behind his desk at Facebook. No one will ever know.
Well, I think this highlights a real issue with the affirmative, is that they're unwilling to even envision a world in which smart tech is private. They just assume that the current limitations that exist on the market right now, the current perverse incentives, will always be there and they'll always operate the same way. We tell you that if governments act responsibly and if they enforce their laws in mandatory ways, then we can actually ensure that this market is changed, right? We're operating under, the AF is operating under the assumptions that the current ways that companies create privacy will always be the same. We're operating under the assumption that governments won't actually take a stand and actually enforce laws that limit data collection and limit abuses of privacy. And that's the reason why they're not really in the right here, because they're not acknowledging that things can change and things are starting to change. There's signs that things are starting to change for the better.
Also, we'd just like to point out that a fatal flaw in the AF's argument is that they impose a pretty standard absolute definition of privacy, what is private to me might not be private to you, right? And I'd also just like to point out that Vincent, in his previous statement, just stated that someone is voluntarily giving up their information. That means they know what data breaches they're susceptible to.
I want to circle back to what Pavis you said earlier, which is, literally, I believe verbatim what you said is that no matter what, tech can't be 100% private. And that's what we want to focus on. You said yourself, it can't be 100% private. And that's what our resolution is. That's what it's saying right here. So, and additionally, it seems like the negatives arguments are being built off of this hypothetical, and we're not talking about a hypothetical. We're not talking about if it can be sometime in the future. We're talking about now. We're talking about what's real.
And if you want to, the whole entire negative is still built on the hypothetical that governments will act, that they might act. They don't, and they use the examples of California and the European Union, but also those haven't been effective at all since their passing. The European data plan. We still see Google and Facebook not acting in regards to that. A Washington Post article recently said on January 21st of last year that still a lot of these tech companies are disclosing too little of their data. They don't care if they get fined. They have the capital in order to fight lawsuits in court. They have the ability as a third party to control that data however they please. That's how the laws are written in terms of data privacy and collection. Third parties have the ability to view your data. You're giving it to someone else, and you can't necessarily ensure that privacy.
Well, just to jump in here.
And then I'll ask you guys the next question.
Yeah, just to jump in here. The California, again, we're talking, there are different laws out there, and some are going to be enforced better than others. We agree that the European Union probably hasn't done a great job of enforcing it. We also have to recognize that governments are slower to adapt than we would like. That being said, California has already filed and won several class action lawsuits against multiple social media companies. Specifically, last year they won a class action lawsuit against TikTok for specifically in regards to the collection of data from minors. Now, again, because there's no federal law on this, it's really hard for this to be directly enforced and for there to be more actual, conclusion to these issues. But that's what we're advocating for, and that's what we're saying should and most likely will happen. These laws get adopted by more and more governments, so there is a broader, more comprehensive, universal framework. Again, it doesn't really work if you have one law in one state, but if you have one law for the entire federal government or, for multiple different countries, then you'll see actually more enforceable action.
Pavis, feel free to jump in.
Thank you. I just have one response to what the AF has said. Throughout the course of this debate, the AF has not just undermined the actual wording of the resolution, which exists for a reason, but actively contradicted it. We are agreeing that there is no privacy currently in the realm of smart technology, but what we're talking about is the possibility of it. And Molly's previous statement just abolished the very wording of the resolution, which is what we're talking about. And just a simple question, no assumptions here. What would you define as private?
Private is normally information that can't be accessed no matter what. Or I guess private, if I'm in control and I give someone something, it's not going to be known. But there's always the realm of possibility of data breaches that has been discussed very thoroughly. And also the fact that, Josh, I love that you brought up the TikTok data collection, because that was actually illegal data collection done by TikTok in the first place. It was entirely against federal law.
I'm going to jump off of that, Vincent, because that actually is directly in line with one of our audience questions for the negative, which is Josh had mentioned the data collection of minors. And also, obviously, we've been talking a lot about informed consent. And one of our questions from our audience members is that a lot of data collection has to do with minors. Is there such a thing as informed consent if the user or the consumer is under 18, is not of the age to actually be able to consent in the first place?
I do not believe so. Our laws are written right
for
now.
The negative.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Personally, I would say no. Again, I don't think that, I think that, laws have to adapt to this changing environment. So I would like to see more implementation of stricter guidelines for minors. I know specifically that California has increased its fines for violations of the data rights of minors. Again, it gets back to the root though. When we have control of our own data, and when we have enforced informed consent, these abuses of privacy can overall be decreased. Again, I personally, and Pavas of course would agree with this, we would like to see stricter enforcement of these laws, specifically in regards to minors. That hasn't materialized as of yet, but again, the trajectory, the direction is there to improve how the data rights of minors are treated.
I agree with Josh that minors cannot be informed in regards to the kind of data that they are exposing, but that brings a better point into this whole entire debate that users aren't informed, that if a minor isn't informed, and that's the reason why we do not allow them to have their data shared, then why should we allow many Americans, as 78% in a whole study said they know little to nothing about what kind of data is being collected. And so if we're using that whole entire premise of informed consent, and that if you're uninformed of what kind of data you're sharing, then using the whole entire NEG's premise, you shouldn't even vote for them, because people are making uninformed decisions on the kind of data that they're sharing. And simplifying some sort of terms and services process isn't going to solve the issue. We haven't seen that issue solved in the European Union, and the data policy has been passed for 2 years, and we still haven't seen terms of service reduced. The point is that people are uninformed on the data, and they make these uninformed decisions to disclose it.
Just circling back to what Josh and I have been talking about throughout this debate, we agree that people are uninformed. What we're talking about is the possibility of people being informed. And when people make informed decisions, there will be less privacy breaches.
The NEG seems to be talking about a ton of hypotheticals. Most of their argument have been hypotheticals. If we can, what we could do. And what affirmative is focusing on is what our circumstances are now, of what we are living in now. I just wanted to reiterate that. We don't see information increasing in this status quo. Excuse me.
Just a really simple question. What does the resolution mean to you guys? What is the operative verb in there?
Can't be private. There is a possibility that your privacy can be breached.
Exactly. So the inverse of that, which is what we are advocating for, which that smart tech can be privacy.
We can argue semantics all night, but the issue at hand is that when we look at the real world examples, we don't see it going well for the negative right now.
Well, let's not argue semantics. Let's go to our final audience question here, which is again for the negative, and then we will move on to our closing arguments. The question here for the negative is, you've been talking a lot about legislation, obviously that's going to be able to attempt to sort of keep these different sort of forms of tech in check. The question here is, how do you do that internationally? Since most technology is global and most data collection is global, how would you be able to enforce that internationally if legislation obviously isn't usually done?
Right. So the world we live in is global. Technology, of course, has a global component to it. But everything apart from technology is also global, right? Trade, general human rights laws, and that's where intergovernmental cooperation comes in. You have certain organizations that bring governments along and lay out certain standards, which is why we have the Geneva Convention. And the global aspect is as applicable to that as it is to technology. So the NEG is hoping, and that's what we're talking about, the realm of possibilities again, not to get stuck on that. But the NEG is hoping that there will be intergovernmental cooperation to work these out.
And I just want to stress here that, again, these new laws, there's really only like one by one U.S. state and one by the European Union. That's two of many to come, right? We're like, as technology is obviously increasing its hold on our lives, more governments are going to want to respond to this quote unquote immutable threat in the market. Like the whole point of AF's case is that right now there's a huge privacy threat posed by smart technology. People in governments recognize this. That's why there's been actions against this. As those privacy risks become more and more apparent, more governments are going to want to constrain that. Thus, they're going to pass laws that are more universal, more enforceable, and they're going to want to work together more. Once again, this isn't happening directly right now. It's starting to. It's not happening right now. It is going to take several years, several more trials of these types of laws to get it right. But this doesn't mean that it will always be not private. There is privacy that we can guarantee if governments act responsibly and if they enforce their laws correctly. And remember, the point of this resolution, smart tech can't be private. We're saying it can.
Also, something that this cooperation is contingent on, and I think Ted talked about this, is the rapidly changing nature of smart tech. Smart tech is relatively new. You kind of need standards. You kind of need to see a baseline there to set these standards, and that's also something that this global cooperation is dependent on.
I will say anything that the affirmative wants to say in response to that, you are more than welcome to say it in your closing statement. I can already see Vincent drinking his water bottle and getting ready, and so is Papa. So this is great. So thank you. This is a spirited second round. I am super enthused to see what you guys have to say in your closings. So that said, as I said before, we'll have our closing round, and then please make sure that you vote afterwards to tell us which side you think has made the better argument, which side has changed your mind the most. Again, our second round is going to go into 2 to 3 minute closing statements, beginning again with the affirmative, and therefore closing out the affirmative side of the resolution that smart tech can't be private. We have Vincent Hasso.
Good evening. Ultimately, this debate has gone back and forth on semantics of can and can't, and whether or not there is a possibility that your data can be private. But ultimately, the negative in today's debate will argue that there is an essential standard of privacy, that your privacy is protected with data. But ultimately, because your privacy is at a major risk of being compromised as a result of smart technology, and the negative simply relies on hypotheticals, I urge you to vote in the affirmative in the debate. First, the evolving world of technology has made it more difficult to protect your privacy. If recent history has shown, data breaches are becoming a more prevalent issue. The Brookings Institution explains the first shots of data privacy were begun to be felt in 2018, and the issue has only grown more complex as Equifax had a data breach of almost 146 million Americans having their data being breached. This is only a small fraction of attacks, though, that are committed because, as Forbes reported, in the first 6 months of 2019, more than 4.1 billion records were exposed in data breaches. As Molly had brought up in her opening statement, is that these devices can easily be hacked into, such as cameras. Now, Josh points out that we live in a realm of possibilities. We can see that regardless of policy, though, that there's always going to be a way for data to be breached. As the negative stated in their constructive, companies are not focused on data security, and in fact, a 2020 Verizon security report found that personal data was involved in 58% of breaches, nearly twice the percentage of last year's data. If companies aren't going to be focused on security, as they have clearly proven in the status quo, then we'll see that data breaches will become much more prevalent and your privacy is not being protected. Second, the privacy notice system is fundamentally flawed and offers no point of protection. Timothy Murris, a professor at George Mason Law, writes, a privacy protection regime that relies on consumers deciphering privacy policies to determine with which service providers they are willing to interact with is not consumer protection at all, and instead places an unreasonable burden on the consumer. The negative instead relies on a futuristic promise that there will be legislation, and they use the examples of California and the European Union, but let's be real. As we've seen, this hasn't been very effective and helping support consumer privacy. In fact, as the Pew Institute in 2019 explained, that 78% of adults know very little to nothing about the kind of data that is collected. Because smart tech wants us to share our information, it doesn't create privacy, but instead discloses us or influences us to disclose that information. Don't believe in any of the false promises of the negative. There's always a possibility that your privacy can be breached. Vote AF.
Our closing statement from the negative side of the debate, we have
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Vincent. I just want to start out by saying thank you to everyone who participated in this debate. It's been a very exciting debate so far. So I just like to start out by laying out what Josh and I have been talking about. In the current world we live in, we are forced to make a trade-off, and this trade-off is between convenience and privacy. Now, time and again, the AF talks about the world we currently live in, and they talk about the changing landscape of technological evolution and advancement. If we're talking about the realm of reality, which the AF does want to stick to so thoroughly, then we also have to agree that this advancement is not going to stop. People are not going to stop using smart technology. In fact, the kind of advancements we're seeing in smart technology are so exciting that people are jumping onto the smart tech wagon now more than ever. So talking about the realm of possibility, this is going to continue. What the NEG talks about is we acknowledge that there is a privacy issue here. We know, and that's what we've talked about throughout this debate. But what we're talking about is imposing solutions, we're offering solutions in such a way that consumers do not have to participate in this trade-off. We can have both convenience and privacy. And of course, there are limitations to the extent of this privacy. Throughout this debate, Josh and I have actually offered solutions to our viewers instead of talking about what exists in the status quo like the AF has done. And the AF, just by what they've been saying, have undermined the very wording of the resolution, and therefore their argument is flawed. That's why we ask you to vote neg. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Thomas. Now it is time for those of you who are watching to please make sure that you cast your votes. Let us know the difference between your original vote and your final vote, where it is that your allegiances lie here, who you think ended up making the stronger argument. Let us know. And as is usually the case, because it's an Oxford-style debate, the winners will be declared not based on who gets the most votes, but who changes the audience's mind the most. We will calculate those votes, and we will announce our winner at our next debate on March 18th, which again, the resolution will be heated rhetoric won't solve policing. So please tune in on March 18th to listen to our heated debate then, and also to hear the winners of tonight's debate. Again, you are the determiners of the winner of each debate that we have. I want to thank all four of our excellent debaters, guys. It was a spirited debate that was absolutely excellent, informative, lively, entertaining as always. And I want to thank all of you, of course, for tuning in. Again, I'm Ted McGloof, and I will see you all in a month at our next debate. Thanks so much for tuning in.